Hi, and good evening. I am Eden Gordon Hill, and we are with Defenders Live, and we are with a special edition this Friday evening. We have the honor to welcome Michael Austin, who's with Project 21. He is an economist, and I tell you what, he is pro-family, he is pro-America. He has served in 2 governor's offices in the great state of Kansas, and also served in the Trump administration. Michael, thank you so much for being here with us.
Oh, Eden, it's really great to be here. I appreciate you having me.
My pleasure. You know what? I have been studying up on your Twitter account. I have been looking at all the different pieces that you've been writing, and I want to hit it hard this evening with you. First and foremost, all of the news headlines that I'm seeing coming from Project 21, July 27, 2022, Biden redefinition still shows recession. And then July 28th, 2022, despite White House denial, recession is here. And then August 6th, 2022, Biden hails jobs report despite bad news for Blacks. Okay, let's break this down. Recession, 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 and then the whole July jobs report. We're headed in, we are now in August, headed into almost September, more than halfway there. Let's talk about really what is a recession first and foremost, and what is the outlook for a legitimate jobs report come August.
Sure. Well, the common rule of thumb used by data analysts, media pundits, and even past presidential administrations have been a recession is where you find 2 consecutive quarters of economic decline. The economy has contracted, has shrank for 2 consecutive quarters. Now, the Biden administration, for some reason, they don't want to have egg on their face,
Mhm.
wants to, confuse the issue by saying you have to consider X, you have to consider Y, you have to consider Z. But let's be honest here. You can dress up a pig, put lipstick on it, and call it pretty, but it's still a pig, right? And
Yes.
Americans still know, right, when they're seeing high prices at the pump, high prices at checkout,
Mhm.
when wages just aren't going as far, that something's wrong and something is in trouble.
Well, let's talk about the state of the nation. I was sitting here this morning, I was listening to some of your interviews in the past couple months and looking at all the different things. I've noticed some of your images at different gas pumps talking about the high gas prices, talking about what is happening to the state of our nation. Here's what I was writing: the fiscal responsibility of the state of our nation, the truth versus fiction of the state of our nation, and Trump versus Biden. So during the Trump administration, both of us served in that administration. I believe, and I saw firsthand, we had money in our pocket. We had money in our pocket. Now we are coming into almost September. We are looking around wondering, how much is it going to cost for us to go to the supermarket? How much is it going to cost for us to even go to work? How much is it going to cost for us to get our kids to school? And are we going to even be able to keep our homes?
No, that's exactly right. It's really clear here. Joe Biden and his policies have just made it far too easy to spend money without having to work, or to stay home without having to work. And that has just created monstrous inflation. Inflation is when demand is far higher than supply. You talked about when we had money, that was great. We bought so many things from Amazon and from
Yes.
overseas.
Yes.
But when the Biden administration is relaxing work requirements, then that means businesses can't hire enough to meet that demand. And so they
Mhm.
have no other choice but to raise prices. It's
Mhm.
it's a it's a vicious cycle. And just like the New Deal or the war on poverty or even Obama stimulus, it
Mhm.
doesn't work. And now our economy is cratering.
Well, let me ask you this. So, the crisis at the border, we see all of these immigrants coming across, Abbott sending them straight to New York, DeSantis sending them straight to Delaware. And I sit there and say, what is that costing us? Knowing that the New York City homeless issue was already big enough, but now there's such an influx of those migrants headed there. What does that look like for the American taxpayer? What does that look like for the middle class? What does that look like for those who are just going paycheck to paycheck, as we know that taxes are going to rise?
Well, there's a good quote by famous economist Milton Friedman. He
Mhm,
says, "The burden of government is not how much it taxes, but how much it spends."
mhm,
And so when you're talking about the flow of migrants coming here illegally, right? Odds are they may not pay taxes, right? But they'll most certainly they'll be in need of social services, and it's all the more important why we need, of course, to have controls at the border so that we know who's coming in and who can be a productive member of society, and that those who do come in, if they do need services, at least they're providing something to the country, to the society in terms of productive work, and of course the taxes that come with it.
mhm.
But the effect on the taxpayers is just going to be huge. We're already what, $29 trillion in debt at least. I'm sure it's
Right.
way higher than that now.
Right.
And that means not only is the bill going to come due either for us in our lifetimes, but
Mhm.
most likely in our children's lifetimes and even in our grandchildren's lifetimes. It's going to be a tax increase on future generations of Americans.
Well, let me ask you about that tax increase that is going to hit the kids that I mentor. It's going to hit my nieces and my nephews. It's going to hit that generation. But let me ask you about that. Let's say 2022 November elections, we have a miraculous red wave. And let's say we get all of these great newly elected officials. Thank God Cheney's out of here. I'll say it for everybody. It was a great day yesterday waking up to find out that she lost her primary. So if we get those type of elected officials out of Congress, out of the marble halls of Congress, and we get some God-fearing, gun-toting, true patriots in there who want to put money back in the American people's pockets, could we actually turn that? Could we actually say, you know what? Come January, February, March of next year, we actually may see something different happen in our dollars, in our pockets, back in our banks. Do you think that actually could happen? Or am I just, rose-colored glasses just dreaming that actually and too idealistic to say, hey, we could actually save our country if this red wave actually happens?
It's happened before, it can
Mm-hmm.
happen again.
Mm-hmm.
For the first 150 years of since this country's founding, there has never been a recession as long or as deep as all the recessions we've had since the 1940s, since FDR.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why is because when things were tough for American families and businesses, when they had to cut back their spending, guess what the federal government did?
Mm-hmm.
Cut back its spending. When
Really? Oh my
Yes,
gosh. What a
amazing, isn't it?
Oh my
When
gosh, who would have thunk?
when families had to, deal with having fewer dollars coming into the home, guess what the federal government did? It reduced its own income by cutting taxes, right? You For 150 years, the economic policy of the federal government, whenever times were tough, was to get out of the way and allow American families and businesses to adapt and to grow. And
Mhm,
since FDR, we've been doing the exact opposite. And it's not a coincidence that times have been longer, harder, and more troubling for families.
mhm,
So if we get a red wave, right, or if we get the right people in office
right.
that are, like you said, God fearing, gun toting, but most certainly believe in limited government and can
Yes.
pull back all these layers of wasteful spending, you can see a recession go away just like that.
Mhm.
And American families and businesses really start to flourish again.
Well, let me ask you this. I am a small business. I am a radio host, but I'm also a small business here in the great state of North Carolina. But right now, I have been running this business with an empty suit in the governor's office. Okay. So, we may have a Republican, very loosely Republican state legislature. But when I sit here and say, what am I going to do as a small business and the swamp drains into the beautiful waters of North Carolina, literally, what do we do as small businesses to say, do I continue in my small business? Do I continue to promote my small business? Of course, we're going to do that because we believe in what we are, selling, what we are doing for the American people. But when when you look at the bank accounts and when you sit there and say, oh my gosh, that's double that it was 6 months ago, what do we say to small business owners who really want to keep their businesses open, but now are looking to the federal government and saying, what the heck did you just do to one, our nation, and now to our states? What are some tools that we can give small business owners? What are some tools that we can give moms and dads and families to get them through this hurdle until we come to January of next year? And I am putting hope in the fact that we actually get some decent Americans in Congress, not to put my hope in government, never put your hope in government, but to say, okay, let's see where we can cut back, but also put more money back in our pockets. What are some tools we can give our American families and our small businesses?
Sure thing. Well, I would say this: if your house is on fire and you put out the fire, uh, would you ever ask yourself, what are you going to replace the fire with?
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
answer is no, right?
Hmm.
When you get rid of something bad, you don't replace it with something else.
Right.
Just getting rid of the bad thing is help enough. And
Right.
that's the same thing when you're thinking about the economy and helping families and businesses and dealing with, economic growth. Government has created the problem by intervening. And
Hmm.
so you can do a lot of good just by getting government out of the way.
Hmm.
But as for something specific we can see at the federal level,
Yeah.
I think most certainly the biggest thing it can do is pull back on regulations, and of course, all the record amounts of spending that we've seen.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
allowing states to put back in work requirements on welfare recipients. It's pulling back federal bonuses on unemployment. It's just stop spending taxpayer dollars after taxpayer dollars and shrinking that deficit. And then
Mhm.
the real work comes at the local level. And when I say
Yes.
local, I don't necessarily mean cities and towns. I also mean
Mhm.
states.
Yes.
Uh, because the beauty of our Constitution and federalism, where there's still a lot of power and leeway given to state governments
Yes.
to help these businesses thrive. And through these state governments, we could support work instead of woke, instead of
Yes.
woke activism,
Yes.
and really allow the American economy to soar again.
Well, let's talk about that. So, state requirements back to the local level. I always say power back to the states. And, I watch Governor DeSantis, I call him America's governor all the time. And I'm seeing all of the amazing things that he is doing in the great state of Florida. And I'm being in the state of North Carolina. Like I told you what I think about what is currently running this state. And at the end of the day, I always say to all the transplants that are moving here, the further south you get, the freer you become, because that is it's so obvious as you further you get south. But looking at power back to the states and the state requirements, let's talk about that. Let's break that down a little bit more. So, being here in the state of North Carolina, and you are currently in Kansas, is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. So, as an advisor to governors, as an advisor to presidents, what would be some of the ideal state requirements that we can give back to the state, power back to the states, and to put more money back into that state's pockets for those people? What would that look like?
Sure thing. So I'll get back on the soapbox. Work requirements
Yes.
is something that can always be done, and it's one way to make sure you get a dollar back. For all the taxpayer dollars that are put out through welfare.
Hmm.
Second, I would look at providing some sort of continuous improvement process on the budget. I don't know about North Carolina, but in Midwestern states here, the entire budget is not all in one document. Some parts of it are over here, some parts of it is over here, some parts of it over here. It's really difficult for everyday folks to know how much their state government is spending.
Uh-huh.
Well, can we put that all in one document so at least there's one place to go in order to read about your state budget?
Right.
Just that type of transparency can most certainly help and how people pick out where the problems are. Not also that, as you talk about you running a small business,
Hmm.
when you're providing a small business and your service, let's say, is subpar, how do
Hmm.
you know that your service is subpar?
Right.
People don't
Right.
buy, right? They don't buy your service, they don't buy your
Right.
product. And that
Right.
triggers you, right, to
Yes.
adapt and to grow. Governments don't really have that, especially state governments. So if there's a way that we could put in a mechanism in place where state governments can figure out whether they're providing a bad service or not, then that means they can ensure that taxpayer dollars are being spent efficiently and spent well.
Hmm.
And of course, that's on the budget side. On the tax side, I think something that should be considered is either a flat tax or no income taxes.
Yes. So let's talk about the flat tax. I've heard many other people say that. My father is a historian in his own right who was a local Pennsylvania official, and we always talk about that. Let's talk about the flat tax. Break that down a little bit more. How would that look?
Sure thing. A flat tax is just one single tax rate.
Mhm.
Some states, of course, have three tax rates depending on your income. Some have four, some have five, some have eight, depending on your income. A flat tax would basically say, let's just do one rate. And of course, they pick what that rate is. And then let's just have a large deduction so that low income people don't have to pay that tax rate. So, usually, what states like to do is they'll say, if your first $24,000 as a family, you won't have to pay any state income taxes on
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
After that, you'll just pay one rate. And that
Mhm.
rate is usually below 5%. The
Mhm.
beauty of that is that, that flat rate means that if you make more income, guess what? You pay more in taxes. If
Right.
you have less income, guess what?
Right.
You pay fewer taxes.
Right.
It's actually a fair type of a tax.
Yeah.
Not only that, but by keeping it simple and just one rate,
Yeah.
you eliminate all of those dollars that are spent on attorneys and accountants and tax financing software.
Mhm.
All that could have been used to make your business more productive, you can flow that back into your business and
Mhm.
hopefully be able to grow. And so it's really just a simplistic idea. It still can help in terms of tax revenues. It still can help in terms of the lower income folks, but it also makes things really easy for American families and businesses.
So going with preparing the American family, as we're talking to our listeners here this evening on Defenders Live, as we are preparing the American family for what's ahead, let's get them through the end of the year, and hopefully it won't be as painful as it has been. But let's be realistic of what is at stake right now at our nation, highest levels of government to the local level. With that said, can you kind of can you prepare us and give us your predictions through the end of the year as to what you see coming from the word salads of the vice president's office, the communications director and the press secretary basically doing their own spin cycle, and let's try and get around those types of things, because what they're doing is they're just frustrating the American people. I am a communications director and I am embarrassed to see what is coming out of our administration. That is not protocol. That is not proper. That's not, you and I both know what it is to serve a United States president. And that is not proper protocol. So at the end of the day, I want to be able to say to our American people, to our backyards in Kansas and North Carolina and Florida and Pennsylvania and New York, what can we say to them through the end of the year? What can we say to them? They'll give them some hope, give them a couple tools to get through. Obviously, we need to shrink our spending, but what else can we say to give them some hope? And what is on the horizon? What do you say to that?
Vote.
Did you say vote?
I said vote. I said vote. I said, oh my goodness, you've really hit it on the head. All this frustrated talk, all this gaslighting, this around the bout way of communicating has basically admitted that the left has no idea how to help the American family through this economic crisis.
Mhm.
They have no idea, right, how to properly, lower prices, allow businesses to grow, make it easier at the gas pump. The best that they can do is acknowledge what the problem is,
Mhm.
but then push their own agenda. That's what this Inflation Reduction Act is. It has nothing to do with inflation. George Orwell would be proud. But what unfortunately it does mean is that they have conceded. They have no real ideas about how to help the American family.
Mhm.
And if that means that they have, abdicated their duty, then it is our job as American citizens to vote them out.
Mhm.
There's not much time between now and the end of the year. There's not much more that the federal government
Yes.
can do. Joe Biden is not going to turn around the federal government and start decreasing spending.
No.
Your our only recourse right now is to be involved, to be activated, to
Mhm.
talk to everyday folks, and make sure that they come out to vote and vote for a representative or senator that fits their interests. And that is
Yes.
getting government out of the way so that they can flourish.
You hit that nail on the head. Exactly. The voter needs to be educated. The voter needs to be involved. And at the end of the day, like we have talked previously, there is a disconnect and they need to be connected to what is actually happening. I do think there is going to be an uprising. I do think people are angry. They've been angry since 2020 and they are still angry. But after what happened with the FBI raid at our previous boss's home, I mean, that's unheard of. That is unheard of. That is not Watergate. And I didn't see anything happen to Clinton. Didn't see anything happen to Obama. And what about Mrs. Clinton being the so-called Secretary of State and all the things that went on there, and Hunter Biden and the laptops? I mean, I'm just baffled by that. So the voters are angry, but they need to be educated when they go to the polls. They don't need to be told X, Y, and Z. They need to educate themselves on who is running, what they're running on, and why they are running to make sure that it's limited government. Let's talk really quickly. We are coming up on the break, and I want to get a couple more things in before I say farewell and wish you a wonderful rest of your week. Talk to me about Project 21. Talk to me about some of the upcoming things we can be looking for coming from you, your writings, your work. Where can we find you, and what can we also be looking towards?
Sure thing. So here at Project 21, the Black Leadership Network, it's a consortium of center-right African Americans who speak not just on African American issues, but on all issues. And it's just to go to show that diversity of thought is not limited to one skin color, right? Those who believe in freedom, those who believe in liberty and limited government can come from any person, any way, shape, or form. And that's what we want to promote. So you can find all of our writings on nationalcenter.org. We talk about education and the need, of course, for educational freedom and school choice. We'll talk about economic freedom, of course. That's usually my particular wheelhouse. So we'll talk about how Biden and congressional Democrats are really tanking this economy. And then also we'll talk about things in particular that people may not necessarily notice, like let's say EPA regulations on minority businesses. The fact of the matter is we want to promote a free market society as well. And we'll talk about the issues that are most important to you in order to get that done.
And also, where can we find you on your social? I've been following you on Twitter. That is a great place to go for you. But what other locations can we find you?
Sure. You can find me on Facebook or on Twitter at KS Economist.
Okay, perfect. Michael Austin, Project 21, a phenomenal economist. Thank you so much for your insight. You are pro-family, you are pro-freedom, and most importantly, you love this country and that you want to fight for the American people. Thank you so much for showing us how to put money back in our pockets and to use our voices wisely as we go out and vote come November. So thank you so much for being here with us. Many blessings to you. We look forward to having you back.
Thank you very much, Eden. God bless.
Thank you.